calculating power in STATA for two populations or two groups that have continuous data in it, and the means for two groups or population are known, and also calculating the power for two groups that have frequencies or counts on them with known proportions. Power is measuring the probability of finding statistical differences between two means or two proportions for two groups if a true difference exists. To do and calculate the power for samples or a data or predetermined and known parameters are required. The first one is the significant levels, which is type 1 error, alpha value, which is the p-value. Second is the standard deviation for both the samples or for both the groups. And the third one is the sample size or the number of items or cases in each group. And finally, the means or the proportions for each group or each categories. We are going to calculate power for data that are continuous and for data that are categorical. Here in STATA, to calculate and determine the power for two samples or two groups, in the command section type power, type the following command, which is power, then space, then 2, and then means all together, space, and then insert the first mean for the first sample, which is 45.6, space, and then the second mean for the second sample, which is 48.3, and then insert comma, space, and then the first standard deviation for the first sample, which is 17.7, space, and then you need to type here SD, then open a bracket and close the bracket, and then type here SD1, and for the second standard deviation for the second sample, insert 18.6. and so here we have two groups. The first mean is 45.6 and the second mean is 48.3, and the standard deviation for the first group is 17.7 and for the second group is 18.6, and then space, and then insert the number of the cases within each group. For group number 1, type n equal to, let's say, 200 and close the bracket, and for the second sample type n 2 bracket 200, close the bracket, and label n for the first group and then the second one for the second group, and then insert also and type the alpha, which is the p-value. We set that at 0.05, close the bracket and hit enter. Output is generated showing that the alpha is 0.05, the total number is 400, the number for group 1 is 200, and the sample size for group 2 is 200. The mean for the first sample, the mean for the second sample, the standard deviation for the first sample, and the standard deviation for the second. And finally, power is estimated, and it is found to be 0.3172. This value means that 32% probability of finding statistically differences at an alpha of 0.05 between these two groups if a true difference or differences exist. If we type again the same command but now increase the sample size from 200 to 2000, and let us see how well the power value change. Copy the command, copy here, select copy and then insert, and then change the N1 to 2000, and the second one add another 0 and then hit enter. As shown here, under this certain specific parameters, the power has increased to 0.99. So there is a nearly 100% probability of finding statistical significances at a value of alpha value of 0.05 between these two means if a true difference exists. So the power has increased with increasing the sample size. Let's do again the same command using 2000 sample size, but instead of instead of using alpha 0.05, change that to 0.1 and hit enter. Again, the power is reduced to 98%. To determine the power, statistical power for two groups that are measured in frequencies or counts, and the proportions for each groups is known, such as a group that have diseases and it have women and men in it, and the frequencies of the women is known, and the frequencies or the count for the male with the disease is known. Then we could calculate the power. The way to do that in STATA is to use the command power and type power space and then 2, since we have two groups, and then we are going to use the command for proportions since these data are categorials measured in frequencies or counts. So type 2 proportions and space, then insert the first proportion for the first category, type 0, 32, and the second proportion is 0.45, space, then N for the sample size, the first sample size, 2 brackets, and insert 100, close the bracket, and the sample size for the second group or category, then type N2, open a bracket, and 100, close the bracket, hit enter. For this command we need to insert comma after the two proportions, so select copy, then insert, and then after the second proportion insert a comma and then hit enter. Output is generated showing that the p-value is 0.05. The first sample has 100 in it, the second is 100, and the first proportion and the second proportion, and the power is estimated to be 0.47 or 47%. This is the way to calculate power for data that have continuous variables in it, or data that are categorials and it is measured in frequencies and proportions in STATA.